Welcome. Today we are going to wrap up our discussion of the 4 atheistic systems of beliefs and practices that we've addressed so far. We're going to evaluate Buddhist notions of Nirodha, as well as the diversity of opinions that emerged out of Greece, Athens, at this same time, Epicureanism, Stoicism, and Cynicism. Before we do that, though, if we're wanting to understand what's going to make you have a good life, many of us will equate this with notions of happiness, though cynics would try to give us a little bit of pause on that. We're going to evaluate why is it that those Scandinavian countries usually rank as some of the happiest places on Earth. Is this about expectations? Is it about something intrinsic? And this might help us evaluate really the ideas of what we want out of a system of beliefs and practices in our own life to overcome the passions and what we should do. In a recent article, it was asked, why is it that those Nordic countries always seem to have the highest places in all of the world happiness surveys that are done? They might vary from year to year who's number 1 and 2 and 3 or 4, but they're always the same basic list of countries that are there in the top 5, if not the top 10. And we all just reflexively want to be happy. Maybe we're right to, maybe we're wrong to, but there is this thought that there's an intrinsic good in being happy. So why is it these countries? Why is it Scandinavia properly, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, and the Nordic countries by extension, including Finland and Iceland? Why is it that these 5 countries consistently rank higher than everybody else? Is there something intrinsic to these countries? Is it the cold weather? Is it part of the culture? Is it something that's going to make them happy and other countries less happy in retrospect? It might be a cultural practice. It might be different things that one culture does that we can steal, use, appropriate, and say, this is going to help me be happy. This is going to help our culture happy. Maybe we should do that. And one of these practices that we see in some of the Nordic countries is a practice known as Huga. And the author asks, is Huga still even a thing? It's an idea that we see in Denmark and Norway, and it's a word for a mood, an attitude of coziness and comfortable conviviality or friendship, with feelings of wellness and contentment. If we're wanting to be happy, wellness and contentment sounds like a great place to start. You can relax and just feel friendly with everybody around you. But is this something you can just embrace and move on? Can you just say, I'm going to be happy, I'm going to be content? Maybe, but that's not easy. Am I going to be cozy and friendly with everybody around me? That's in many ways antithetical to American culture. Right? We'll shake your hand and make sure we keep the distance between us. Warm and friendly, not so much. But that doesn't mean we can't try a little bit more. We can't work on trying to slow our life down enough to recognize the world around us and try to be content and comfortable with things as they are. Be content with the circumstances that you have instead of always trying to do more with it. The nice thing about Huga is that it's not an elaborate system. You don't have to eat certain foods or buy certain things. It's not a large philosophy that's impossible to really approach. It's not like Nirodha or Stoicism or hedonism. It's not asking you for what are the 4 truths of Huga and trying to evaluate this. It's just an idea of trying to slow things down I mean, obviously some things wouldn't hurt, wool socks and candles and a fireplace, might help you feel a little more cozy, but it's not essential for this practice. But the practice is trying to make every moment, or as many moments as possible, truly intimate and comfortable and simple, which is a very deliberate and in many ways difficult act when some of us are culturally or otherwise hardwired to just go, go, go. There's work to be done. Why am I going to sit around and just relax by the fire? Maybe I'll relax by the fire while I'm doing 35 other tasks, right? I'm going to be sorting laundry. I'm going to be working. I'm not going to just stop and slow. But that's kind of what Huga is asking us to do. It's about making rituals out of mundane things. Doesn't mean you're not doing anything, but sometimes you're going to make things take longer and be less productive with them, in the sense that you're producing something, but not the sense that you're, being productive in your own life. You don't just brew your coffee and toss it down and head out the door. You intentionally slow down and you enjoy that first cup of coffee in the morning, or a glass of tea, or something later on, right? You slow it down. You make something you do every day into a ritual. You may even make it more elaborate than necessary. Instead of just hitting the on button to, have your drip coffee start, maybe you do a pour over. Maybe you grind the beans instead of getting them pre-ground. It's better tasting that way anyways. Or you do a French press or something, and you do a pause while you're waiting those 4 minutes for the coffee to steep in the press. You make a intentional, slow ritual that maybe calms you and centers you, and you see value in that, and you maybe think about your loved ones or something during that time. You make anything that you into a verb. It's an action. It's not coffee. We're doing coffee. Objects are actions. Everything is deliberate. Maybe not everything, but as many things as possible. So, would this really make you happy? I mean, that's the question here, right? It sounds nice, and it sounds like it's doable in some ways, and maybe you do one day a week. Maybe Saturday mornings you don't have work, you don't have school, you don't have all of these other obligations. Maybe you have all right, I'm going to try a little bit here. But can you do it for all day, every day, everything? Again, we have jobs, we have work, we have household tasks, we have friends that we need to go and be with, and we have things to do with them. But Huga is usually given as the reason why the Danes are the happiest people on the earth, which, if it works for them, maybe it'll work for us. Maybe. But Denmark isn't always the happiest. Recently, there's a rise in another Nordic country that is now the happiest, depending on the years. Usually Iceland and Finland, outside of Scandinavia properly, but there. Finland doesn't do Huga, as you find in Denmark and Norway. Instead, they have a word that's much harder to pronounce, Karl Sarkinak, and I'm sure I'm missing at least one consonant in that. Karl Sarkinak doesn't have the same thoughts as Huga. It's not about slowing everything down. It's a different approach. It's best translated, though there's no equal translation to it, as pants drunk. And it's the practice of binge drinking home alone in your underpants. And that this is the secret to happiness. At the end of the day, or maybe on a weekend or something else, you're going to sit in your underwear alone in the dark and you're going to drink. And some of you are thinking, I could probably do that one instead of slowing down my entire life. I can just go ahead and toss back a few and enjoy a libation or two or more, alone, maybe in the dark. Many of us see this as maybe a little problematic. Others of us, it sounds like a great way of unwinding at the end of the week. Would this really make you happy? Makes your problems go away for a little while, but I'd introduce a few new ones. Recently, a cabinet member of the Finnish government was introduced at an international conference as the representative of the happiest country in the world. His response was, "If that's true, I'd hate to see those other nations." In 1993, 60 Minutes painted a picture of the Finns, also very different. They said it's not a state of national mourning in Finland. These are Finns in their natural state, brooding and private, grimly in touch with no one but themselves, the shyest people on earth, depressed and proud of it. Which, again, doesn't sound like happiness. But they're usually described as reserved and melancholy and don't smile. If we were to rank happiness off of smiles that people have, Finnish people would be recognized as some of the most miserable. So why is it that they're ranked as the happiest? In fact, a lot of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, and Finland are not always happy. There's lots of melancholy and somberness and work. It's not just people slowly having coffee in the morning or tea in the afternoon or 13 cocktails in the evening, right? There's other things to be done, and people still produce things. So what makes these countries happy? How do you measure happiness is really a great question. Do you measure it in smiles, as some imply that we should? But just because you're smiling doesn't mean you're not crying on the inside. Do we measure it in wealth? I got a lot of money. That's going to help me be happy. Maybe, maybe not. Probably not. Really not the best way of trying to make yourself happy, because you'll never quite have enough. Education. It's not a bad one. Being educated gives you a lot of value, and a lot of people are trying to say, well, it's a great city to live in. They're ranking the quality of education and culture that goes along with educated things, arts, theaters, etc. Health is another great way of understanding ways of being happy. If you're sick, you're not quite as happy, and having good access to healthcare is a good, maybe, measuring stick and trying to measure how you're going to be happy. At that point, basic notions of peace and security are also not bad. If you're constantly under threat of being killed, you're probably not going to be as happy. You might be overjoyed when you don't get killed in one moment, but that's not the same as, what we would say is, oh, you're a really happy people that day that you weren't killed. Being at peace, not having other people hate you, or being at war with others around you is a great measure for happiness too. But some of these, wealth, peace, security, even education and health, are really just bars that we think that we need to jump over, and that these are minimum things. If you're poorly educated, if you are impoverished, if you're at war and have no security, we'll say you're probably not very happy, because you're not able to thrive, that life is too grueling and too much suffering. But none of these are in themselves things that we would say are going to make you happy. They're just the things that might keep you from being happy. So how does the World Happiness Report decide who's the happiest countries? What's their criteria? They don't pay attention to smiles, laughter, or outward expressions of joy. They're not going around and seeing the people who have tears of joy instead of tears of sorrow. They're not seeing how long people will give anyone else a good warm hug or any of these other outward sort of things. You're like, well, that you look happy. You're contented with this, that, and the other. Instead, they rely on polls done by other organizations such as Gallup, who asks their respondents to imagine a ladder with steps numbered from 0 to 10. 10, the top rung, represents the best possible life for you, while the bottom rung, 0, is the worst. In other words, you're deemed happy if your actual life circumstances approximate your highest expectations. What's the best possible life for you? If you think you're there, you're happy. If you think you're not anywhere near it, then you're sad. Now, some of us might have a problem with that being the criteria, but it's the criteria. It's what they are using to rank and decide who's happy and who's not. So, where are you? You have to stop and think, where are you if this is the criteria of being happy? 10 is the best possible life and 0 is the worst possible life. Where would you rank yourself? Are you near the top? Are you near the bottom? Are you consistently and happily in the middle somewhere? That's really kind of completely subjective. But stop and think for a second. Where would you put yourself on this scale? Why not a little bit higher or a little bit lower? What's making you decide you're at this rung instead of somewhere else? Then think about those people around you, friends, family, etc. Where would you put them on this ladder? Would they be roughly the same spot as you? Or higher or lower? And why are they where they are? If they're close to where you are, is that because this is where our culture is? We're all this happy in your estimation? Or not? Do you have a widely different view for your family and your friends than you do for yourself? Are they all happier or less happy than you? Again, things to stop and think about. What we see is it's all about the expectations. We shouldn't ignore expectations as an aspect of this formula used by the World Happiness Report. What do you expect out of life? If it's more, then you might be a little less happy than if it might be a little bit less. If we're going to look at these Scandinavian countries, consistent with their cultural heritage of Lutheranism, they're united with an embrace of curbed aspirations for the best possible life. Do you want to expect more in your life than you're going to be able to get? Do you want to say, I need more in life than what you know you're going to be able to do? Or should you be a little bit more realistic? Do you need to change how you're going to order those rungs? While Shakespeare says expectation is the root of all heartache, do we not value the idea that instead we as a culture say, shoot for the moon, in case you miss you'll still land amongst the stars? But your expectations do give you reason for remorse. You expect something and you don't get it. A relationship isn't all that it was early on in that relationship, and you think, what happened? Right? You're expecting perfect love and just infatuation to carry you through your entire life, instead of saying, no, we'll get used to each other, and things that I really like about them will become annoying, but I still love them, and in fact, I've got more reasons to love them, but it's different. Are you expecting that warm, gooey feeling all the time? If that's it, you're going to be going through a lot of relationships, because you're going to realize they're not happening. But Do you settle for a relationship that's just bleh? They're nice, I guess. They're not completely, hideous. So, right? Probably need to be somewhere in between with our expectations of relationships with others, or jobs that you have, or friendships that you make. You might have a friend and you go, yeah, you really don't care about me. I expect more than that from somebody I'm going to call a friend. I'm done trying to be involved with you. And maybe that's good. You want friends that are a little more, important in your life instead of just there. So we need to find the right spot for our expectations to be. Maybe your expectations in some things are too high. Maybe in some areas they're too low. Which way is right? The Scandinavians usually take up those top 4 or so spots of happiness, and it's because they don't expect too much. They're fine with just kind of a middle level of getting stuff. Having a few things instead of having all the things. If you want all the cards, you're not going to get them. So what do we do? Is what they're doing right or sad? A common attitude out of Scandinavia was laid out in stark terms in 1933 in a book called A Fugitive Crosses His Tracks, written by Danish-Norwegian author Axel Sandemors. And in this, he satirically conjectures that Danes are so happy because their highest aspiration is to be average. And he mocks the fictionalized small town of people from the village where he actually grew up. And this creates what's known as the law of Jante. Yanti. The law of Yanti is what really, what this is coming on. There's 10 rules that state that you shouldn't think that you're anything special. Don't think that you're as good as we are. You're not as good as everybody else. Don't think that you're smarter than everybody else. Don't convince yourself that you're better than everyone else. Don't think you know more than everyone else. Don't think you're more important than everyone else. Don't think you're good at anything. You're not great at anything. You're okay. Don't laugh at everybody else. Don't mock them for saying that they're less than you and have this idea of pride and superiority. Don't think that anyone really cares about you either. And don't think that you can teach anyone anything. Now, some of this kind of seems like it's a repeat of the same idea. And most of us look at this and go, maybe a little bit of it's okay, but not all of it, not to an extreme. Don't think you're anything special. It's probably not bad advice, right? That you're okay. You're not exceptional. There's no one who's exceptional, or there's very few people who are. There's very few people who are smarter than everybody else, or who are more important than anyone else. If you go around thinking that you're smarter than everyone and better than everyone and more important and that you're the best at doing what you do, no one's going to like you. This isn't very good for your overall happiness and well-being either. There's no notion of excess accumulation. There's no notion of happiness of he who has the most toys wins here. There's not a competitive streak. In fact, there's a sort of humility that, while we might find it a little depressing, kind of helps you out a little bit in some things. Haha, I'm better than you. Is that really going to make you feel good? Is that really going to help you have a life that goes well? Or is it not? This becomes part of the question here. And while this was a satirical work, maybe we don't want to take it so extreme here with the law of Yanti, but maybe we take a little bit of it. I don't know. So where does your happiness come from? The Finns embrace a cultural orientation that sets realistic limits to your expectations for a good life. In Finland and the rest of these Nordic countries, they imagine this 10-step ladder as not so tall. The first rung is pretty high up, but after that, the rest of the rungs are relatively short. People are socialized to believe that they have it as good as it gets, or pretty dang close. And this attitude might help explain why the Finns are usually the happiest people in the world, despite living in small apartments and earning modest incomes with even more limited purchasing power because of the high prices of goods and taxes. In America, we tend to believe that the first few rungs of the ladder are really easy to get, but the elusive ones are those high up ones. Maybe we need a middle ground. Maybe we need a ladder that's going to help a little bit more, that things are a little bit more reasonable. The Swedish and Norwegian term lagom, which is translated as just the right amount for a lot of things, might be where we want to go. It embraces a notion of modesty and a rejection of excess. So you're not wanting everything, like we might find here in America, nor are you fine with just having barely enough to go off, as you might find in some of these other countries. Maybe embracing some notions of modesty aren't bad. Maybe we need to be a little more realistic in what we're doing and what we're expecting. Or is happiness in this idea of wanting more? Is us saying, no, I can't be realistic. I need more, because by wanting more, I'm going to push myself to actually be smarter, stronger, more important than others. Maybe that's what makes somebody great, is the fact that they never have enough. And maybe you're not happy, but maybe happiness isn't all that it's cracked up to be. So turning to these earlier ethical systems that we addressed, do you want to be happy? Is that the standard of what's a good system? Or is there something that's better than happiness? And is that a good life? And is a good life not necessarily being happy? Is it one where you might be ranking miserable, but you're thriving in many other avenues? What do you actually need for a good life? Where does this come from? We want to have a good life, but where's the root of this? Right now, you should go and review your pro and cons for each of these atheistic systems of beliefs and practices. Identify what are the good things out of Stoicism, Cynicism, Neruda, and Epicureanism, and what are the bad things? What do you think they lack? What do you think doesn't fit for you and your life? You should have generated these as we went along, but if you didn't, now's a good time to at least write a quick list of what do you think were good and what do you think were bad? What worked and what didn't work? And again, maybe it works for somebody else, but that just wouldn't work for you. That your worldview doesn't line up, or that your expectations don't line up, or you don't think that this is going to make you happy or have a good life. And it might for somebody else. Or, if I took a little bit of this, I would be way better off with my life. And I should probably listen to what this system says. Then you should go ahead and go through and rank them. Instead of just having pros and cons for each of them, I want you to stop and pause and give me a quick 1 through 4. Give me a rundown on these. Why is one higher than the other? Maybe you've got a couple that are paused, but why is it that one is a clear standout and the best for you? Why is another one a little sketchy? Maybe it doesn't quite work for you. Or maybe they all equally do or equally don't. But run through and just give a quick rank of 1 through 4 and see why you like what you like. Usually there's trends that if you talk to somebody else, you're going to both find a way to agree on something, or you might have some value in there. But why is it that you really like one or don't like another? Which one of these do you think is going to help you the most with some of those ethical questions that you have facing your own life, that we as a society have? Do you think that the ones that will work best for you are also the ones that are going to work best for all of society? Yes or no? You should also stop and ask yourself, are these just ethical systems of beliefs and practices, or are they religious systems? Are these religious beliefs? They all have cosmologies. They all have a direction. They all have rituals. They all have many of the aspects of what we think of as a religion, but are they all religions? Are some of them religions and some not? Look back at your earlier definition of religion and seriously evaluate, is this one a religion or not? And why? I mean, knee jerk, a lot of you will say that one of these 4 is and the other 3 aren't, because you've been accustomed to saying that one of them is and the 3 of them aren't. But maybe all 4 of them are, or maybe all 4 of them are not. What makes one more a religion and one less a religion? What does one thing have and another lacks if you're going to say that one is a religion and the others aren't? Where's that line? Where's that demarcation? They all have worldviews, they all have assumptions, they all have expectations. So is that it, or is your definition of religion smaller and saying, sorry, it doesn't count, gone? Finally, after you've reviewed all of these things, you need to go online and check Canvas for your paper prompt. Uh, there's going to be a paper, and going through this and stopping and reflecting is the essential step that you're going to take before you're writing this paper. So write this paper after you've done this discussion and you've thought about things and you've engaged with the pros and cons in your rankings, and you're thinking about what are the actual criteria for you to have a happy life or a good life. Maybe a good life is not a happy life. So stop and evaluate and address those, and then go to Canvas and check your paper.